Welcome back to Earned Value Management. This is section 5 where I talk about forecasting. So assume that this line is the cumulative value of the project plan. So in the beginning you don't spend a lot of money, costs ramp up, and toward the end you tail off. And assume this red line are the actual costs. Earned Value does a great job of giving you status on where you are to date and where your costs are. And it's helpful in allowing you to forecast. So we talked a lot about various methods to compute ETCs, estimate to complete, and EACs, estimate of completion, and comparing that to the budget at completion. So in project management in general, tracking status is important. But what's really important is forecasting how you're going to end up. So in the beginning, when you have a plan, that is your initial forecast. And if it's a detailed plan, it's probably a good forecast. You define activities, you sequence them, you assign durations, you assign budgets, and then you work to the plan. But as you go along, you're going to diverge from the plan. And so at various points in time, and this should be done monthly, and definitely at major gates of reviews, you want to forecast how you're going to end up. And if you predict that you're going to end up way up here, overrun, you either want to replan and let people know, especially the people that are giving you funding, that you're going to overrun, or maybe there's a way you can recover. Maybe there's measures you can take that will bring you within plan. So I want to talk about forecasting a little bit. So one way to forecast is to just track the cost performance index. And so I don't have dates down here because this is hypothetical, but the x-axis is time and the y-axis is the cost performance index. Now this is fairly typical on a project, that the CPI will go up and down and up and down and up and down. Month to month, if you're looking at CPI, like down here, it's pretty low. That's a bad month. But there could be reasons for that. It could be nuances in the way you take earned value. I mentioned XY techniques. Sometimes you can't take earned value until you finish, even though you spend a lot of money and expended a lot of effort. And, this project is actually doing fairly well. The average is a little bit above 1, but it's hard to tell that month to month. So one way to assess performance is to look at month-to-month CPI, but you want to you don't want to react to the volatility. So one way to smooth this out is to do a moving average. And what you do with the moving average is, in this point, you take the average of the current month, the previous, and the previous. This month, and this is a 3-month moving average, you're taking an average of the prior 3. So as you can see, the average here of this month, and this month is right about there. Because this month went up, it moves the average up a little bit, but this is averaging these 3 points. These 3 points are averaged here. These 3 points are averaged here. And this kind of smooths out the volatility. And you can see that here. The dotted line is nowhere near as volatile. What you should know about moving averages is a lagging index. So you can see there's a sharp downturn here. This didn't react as much. You kind of don't want it to. But if you really have a trend that's going downward, a moving average isn't going to predict it until a little bit later. So just know that moving averages are what's known as a lagging. There's other techniques. And in Microsoft Excel, these are all available. If you click on this line and right-click, you'll see an option called Trend Line. And you can pick moving averages, you can pick second-order polynomial fit. So this is not volatile at all. And maybe the performance has been great, but it's trending down. And that's kind of what this curve says. Now, don't believe these curves. It's interesting to see the shapes. Use your experience, use your intuition. But this is one way to do a forecast. And maybe because there was such a large drop, the CPI that had been doing pretty well is trending downward. You can do a third-order polynomial fit. You can actually do a polynomial that would predict these pretty precisely. But in this case, it looks like there's a downward trend, an upward trend, a downward trend. And again, take this with a grain of salt. Maybe the CPI is falling off a cliff here, maybe not. And if you're involved with the project and with what's actually going on, you might know if these are a couple of outliers. You might know if there's really going to be a negative trend. But anyway, this attempts to deal with the volatility that is in the month-to-month CPI. Now, the same goes for schedule performance index. It can be volatile as well. Another key metric to look at, the blue is the monthly CPI. The red is the cumulative. So what red means is, here we only had 1 data point. Here we had 2. But the red is the sum total of all the cost performance indices. And if you remember that cost curve, you spend a little bit in the beginning, you spend a lot more in the middle, you spend a little bit at the end. In the middle, you're taking a lot of performance. And in this case, if you had a down month, but you didn't take a lot of performance, and then you had an up month where you took a tremendous amount of performance, the cumulative performance index is going to indicate that. It's going to roll all of it up. So if you had a light month, say this was the December, when there's holidays and you weren't planning to get a lot of work done, if your CPI is low, it's not as bad as if you had a negative CPI down here where you were taking a lot of performance. So if most of your performance that you're taking is in these peaks, you're doing pretty well. And the cumulative CPI is going to tell you that. Now, if you have a project where it's gone very badly and you're never going to recover, then your cumulative CPI is going to be low, and you just know you need to measure it at that low level. So something else that smooths out the volatility is to look at the cumulative cost performance and schedule performance. Okay, so forecasting, essentially, you want to use whatever techniques are at hand to try to predict if you're really going to meet this end budget. And as I mentioned in the previous section, the best forecasting technique is to do a bottoms-up estimate, and to really look at the schedule, the tasks, the durations, the amount estimated, and from a bottoms-up perspective. And bottoms-up was done here in the beginning. Periodically, you want to do it again, and that's the most effective way to forecast if you're going to come in on schedule and budget. Okay, also, schedule performance. I talked about cost performance, but schedule performance is best tracked in the schedule, and this is Microsoft Project. And these Gantt charts are wonderful. You can look at these and see, there's usually a time now line. But if these progress bars are behind, you know that task is behind. If they're ahead, you know they're ahead. And if you started something early, it's very clear. So schedule performance is more effectively assessed by using a project scheduler and a Gantt chart view like this. And you want to use these in combination. If you see things finishing early, you know your SPI is going to be above 1. And again, cumulative SPI tells more of a story. Now, the interesting thing about SPI, Schedule Performance Index, is if you're negative and you're underperforming but you finish the project, you're going to accomplish all the work, which means the cumulative SPI is going to end up at 1.0. That's not true for cost performance. If you overrun and you exceed your budget, you're never going to get below your budget, and your cost performance index will be below 1 by the end of the project. But schedule performance will eventually close at 1. The only way it doesn't is if you cancel the project. So as long as the project continues, you will end up at 1.0.